Good afternoon, everyone. I know some of you we're not quite started yet, but I had a riddle for people as they're coming into the room. So feel free. Here's a riddle for you to ponder while you're waiting for the webinar to start. What force and strength cannot get through with a gentle touch I can do? In the street one would stand were I not at hand. What am I? So as you're coming in, feel free to use the chat box to answer that riddle, and we'll see if you got it correctly. I don't see anybody typing in the chat box yet. Please don't be shy. Madeline, hello. Matilde, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Matilda? Oh, wonderful. Good to see you, Matilda. Diana, wonderful. Great to see you. Mariella, welcome. Diana, Selena, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. So as you come into the room, please feel free to answer the riddle. So what force and strength cannot get through, with a gentle touch I can do. In the street one would stand, were I not at hand. What am I? This is try to get you out of your head. I know some of you have had a very long day, and this webinar comes at a time just as your day is wrapping up, so we're really grateful that you're joining us. Yesenia, welcome. Michelle, lots of folks from Peru. I am thrilled. I apologize that I'm not offering this webinar in Spanish, but I would have more apologies to give if I did do it in Spanish, because my Spanish is not good. No es bueno. Grace, Jaime, welcome. Giovanna, welcome. Shirley, good to have you. Now, is everybody from Peru so far? Oh, Mildred, welcome. Good to see you, Mildred. Ah, Brazil. Okay, so we have someone else from, in Ecuador? Okay, good. So we have some other countries but Peru that are joining us.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Hi.
Ezekiel, hi.
Everybody. Welcome to this new webinar. If you allow me now, I'm going to speak in Spanish for a couple of minutes. I will
of course.
You at this point, and also I will give some guidelines for the next hour that we're going to share, okay?
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, Ezekiel.
Muchas gracias a todos los que nos están acompañando. En este momento somos 70 participantes. Bienvenidos a este nuevo ciclo de webinars organizado por la Dirección de Internacionalización de Centrum. Como saben, es una iniciativa con la cual buscamos acercarles a distintos expositores del ámbito internacional para poder tratar distintas temáticas. En esta oportunidad, antes de introducirla a Michelle, me gustaría darles algunos lineamientos a todos para que podamos disfrutar de este webinar. En primer lugar, le pedimos a todos, por favor, que en todo momento mantengan sus micrófonos y cámaras apagadas. Sí va a haber un tiempo para preguntas y respuestas, en los cuales vamos a invitar a todos a participar levantando la mano o escribiendo su pregunta en el cuadro del chat, ¿sí? En ese momento, sí, las personas que se les habilite para hablar van a poder activar su micrófono y hacer las preguntas. La presentación durará aproximadamente unos 45 minutos, dejando lugar a los últimos 15 para las preguntas. Por otro lado, les pedimos a todos, por favor, de que cambien sus nombres en los usuarios, aquellos que son números o que no está el nombre completo. Nos ayudaría mucho si pudieran poner su nombre completo y el país de donde nos visitan. Habiendo dicho eso, ahora me gustaría presentarla a Michelle Graham, quien va a ser nuestra oradora el día de hoy, ¿sí? Michelle Graham durante los últimos 15 años ha trabajado en desarrollar soluciones para mejorar las habilidades de trabajo de poblaciones marginadas. Luego de una década trabajando para el Departamento de Trabajo de los Estados Unidos, Michelle se mudó a Arabia Saudita para ayudar a las mujeres saudíes con educación superior a entrar en el mercado laboral. Luego trabajó para la OTAN, preparando a miembros de la Fuerza de Seguridad afgana. Durante su estadía en Afganistán, Michelle también participó del programa USAID Promote Women in Government Project, enfocado en ayudar a mujeres afganas a desarrollar las habilidades necesarias para poder desempeñar puestos de liderazgo en oficinas ministeriales de todo el país. Actualmente, Michelle trabaja como directora asistente del programa de aprendizaje curricular experimental en Carey Business School, la escuela de negocios de la Universidad Johns Hopkins, en donde se ocupa de coordinar todos los programas académicos internacionales. A partir de este momento, tiene la palabra Michelle. Michelle, from now on, you can start with your presentation. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, Ezekiel, first of all, everybody give a thanks to Ezekiel. He is my co-host today, coming from Centrum Campus. And from home actually, but normally he works on Centrum Campus. And I am absolutely delighted to have Centrum as a partner and honored that I was asked to present today. So I know everybody's introducing themselves, but look to the screen, read the riddle, and I want you to type your answer to the riddle in the chat box. So please do that now. What force and strength cannot get through, with a gentle touch I can do. In the street, one would stand, were I not at hand. What am I? Go ahead and type your answer in it's an object. Yes, Alicia, it is an object. Any more guesses? Keep them coming, keep them coming. The sun, Michelle, no. It's a good one though. What else do we have? Don't be shy. I'll give a few more seconds and then I'll show the answer. Any more answers? Well, the answer is a key. So with that gentle touch, we can open something that otherwise we would be pushing and pushing with brute strength against it all day long, but a key. So I thought that would be a way of us to get out of our heads from our long days and to get more engaged with this webinar. And I thought the key was a great metaphor for what we're discussing today during the webinar about how to overcome challenges, especially in restrictive conditions like we're experiencing now. So the rules for today's webinar, I know Ezekiel had gone through those, but I'm going to turn off my camera for just a moment so that I can save bandwidth, but I will be coming back in and out with that. So the rules for today, please use the chat box to share your thoughts in real time. Try to use the split screen to view the slides and chat box simultaneously. Mute your microphone unless asked to unmute by the presenter. Participate in the polls and quizzes. And then after 45 minutes, there will be a 15-minute question and answer session. So you'll have a chance for us to engage fully in that question and answer session. And I think most of you have told me where you're coming from. I have a lot of folks I see from Peru, as well as Ecuador, Brazil. I have a wonderful colleague, Priscilla, who's joining me from Carey Business School. Thank you. And so that's where I am located. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. And if you draw a straight line north from Lima, that's where it is. The fun thing is I'm on the Atlantic, Lima's on the Pacific. We're on different coasts, but when it's not daylight savings, we're in the same time zone. For any of you who are from the United States, you may notice that I have kind of a funny accent, and that comes from the rural Midwest, America's heartland. So that's me. Those are my brothers and I when we're kids, and in case you can't see who the girl is, that's me right there. So you may be wondering why a farm girl from the rural Midwest is talking to you today about restrictive societies and how to overcome things. So my background's in workforce development, as Ezekiel shared with you. I started about 20 years ago working with individuals with disabilities. These young adults were looking to enter the workforce, and so my job was to use them as the guide, to make sure that they had a self-determination model where they were guiding what their career pathways were going to be, and that we could find meaningful work for them. And I absolutely loved doing that. Later on, when the Great Recession hit in 2008, and we saw record numbers of unemployment, I began working with the Department of Labor in the United States and the Colorado and the Pikes Peak region to get as many folks back to work as possible. And that required retraining, that required re-credentialing and making connections with employers. And so through that work, I had the chance to work with a diverse population, executives from Fortune 500 companies and young adults who were just beginning their career pathways with little to no work experience. I worked with incarcerated individuals in the prisons who are looking to rejoin society. I also have done a lot of work with military folks, veterans that were transitioning to the civilian sector, military spouses, and displaced homemakers. But what I really enjoyed was working with immigrants and workers, refugees that had come to the United States to make a new life, to make a new home. So with these English language learners, I really enjoyed the work I was doing. And I thought, what can I do to take these workforce development skills and take them overseas? So around that time, it was about the Arab Spring 2011, where a lot of reforms were happening in the Middle East, and these numbers jumped out at me. So if you look at Saudi Arabia and the participation of women in the workforce, we saw a significant jump from 2010 to 2011, right as those Arab Spring reforms were taking place. But if you notice, it still was far below the global average. So with Saudi Arabia, the women participating in the workforce is around 20%, and the global average is around 50%. So I saw an opportunity. So I packed my bags, I made my way over to Saudi Arabia. If you can't tell who I am in the picture, that's me there. And I spent 3 years in Saudi Arabia working with women who were looking to gain the necessary skills to enter the labor force. I was in higher education, working at the university level, as well as working with vocational colleges. And I really enjoyed my time there. Then after 3 years in Saudi Arabia, I went to a completely different part of the world, which is Afghanistan, which is a war zone area. It doesn't have the resources and the financial wealth at Saudi Arabia, but there are some correlations in that the women in both of these societies have a lot of obstacles in their way. And so today I wanted to talk to you about how these women were able to overcome their obstacles and be able to join the workforce, and how we can do that through economic development and workforce skills. So the keys that we're going to be talking about today in this workshop are resiliency in restrictive environments, similar to what we're experiencing now with COVID-19. So the increased growth for women in the job market in Saudi Arabia, why now? Societal gains in the last decade and how those were taking place along the same time. Essential resources for women's employment around the world, regardless of what society they're in. Work readiness skills and entrepreneurship, and creating purpose and belonging. So let's launch in. I actually have a poll, and let's see if this works. Ezekiel was kind enough to put these together for me. So you should see it up on your screen. Since the start of COVID-19 and all of these mandates, how has your sleep been affected? Do you A, feel so tired that you sleep more than usual? B, feel so stressed that you sleep less? Or C, no change at all? So A, sleep more, B, sleep less, C, no change at all. Oh my goodness. Okay, the answers are coming in. Lots of variety here. All right, I'll give it about 5 more seconds to get your answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see what everybody said. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you said B, that you feel so stressed that you sleep less. We had about 24% said A, they sleep more, and then 33, no change at all. Well, I do have to tell you that I fall into the A category, and I'll show you on my next slide here. When stress and chaos and all of these things are taking place, one of the things I experience is I just get exhausted and overwhelmed, and I feel helpless and hopeless. So this was in Afghanistan when there was rocket fire incoming, and immediately we had to shelter in place for great lengths of period at a time. I'm that one on the floor. I'm the person sleeping. So there is an instinct, I know, for many of us when trauma happens or when uncertain circumstances happen, we want to shut down. But today we're going to be talking about, how once you get up over that initial trauma and those initial obstacles, how you can move past that and see positive things for the future. So some of the keys I found in working with women in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan is that there were 6 keys to resilience and motivation. And I look at those as a sense of humor and appreciating opportunities. And if anybody knows what the serenity prayer is, feel free to type it in the box. Does anybody know what the serenity prayer is? And the serenity prayer goes, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Give me the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I go a step further when it comes to a sense of humor and appreciating opportunities. I say that when things feel uncontrollable and we don't know what the future looks like, a sense of humor to try to laugh it off, find optimism. And at the same time, when you do have an opportunity, is not to be pessimistic, but to look at those freedoms you do have and to appreciate those. The third thing to resilience I found was a sense of purpose. What gets you up in the morning? A sense of belonging. So this is a larger community, feeling like you're respected by your peers as well as others in the society. Access to resources. So those first 4 were more intangible, but these last 2, access to resource and advocacy, are more tangible things, very real things that we can access to help us with our motivation. And what I have found in both Saudi Arabia and in Afghanistan, these women had a lot of challenges, and they were so appreciative of the freedoms they did have, got a great sense of humor. And you'll see that in these photos. And for those of you who are not familiar with Saudi Arabia, rest assured that I did not teach my classes with the women covered in black like that. They actually were wearing just normal clothes. This is a picture from the King Saud University campus in Riyadh, and it's on a rainy day. And what I love about this picture is in Saudi Arabia, the women love rain. You think about a very dry, arid climate with relentless sun. And when the rain came, the students would beg to have classes being taught outside. And I never have looked at a rainy day the same way since. This is from one of my colleagues, Kim, who I spent time with in Saudi Arabia. And take a moment to read her comment. It may sound a bit dreary, but you'll notice at the end of her comment, she has a laughing emoji, because she took, for those of us who you live through restrictions, you take it all in stride and recognize sometimes the ridiculousness of what you're experiencing. So to give you a feel for what those restrictions looked like in Saudi Arabia up through 2017, this is what Saudi women were experiencing. So number 1, the abaya. the cloak, that's the full body black cloak and head cover, and that's me wearing it. And for Saudi women, many of them also covered their faces. In fact, my friend Trish and I, in this picture, it was so noteworthy for the locals in Al-Hassa that our faces were uncovered that we made the front page of the paper. Gender segregation in businesses and restaurants, no driving, and not allowed into sports events. That's both as a spectator as well as a participant. So to continue on with those restrictions through 2017, there were limited career pathways and there were multiple restrictions on what they could do with their working hours and conditions. They weren't permitted to travel or obtain a passport without permission from their male guardian. That would be their father, their husband, even their brother. And if you are a widow and your husband has passed away, that means your son is your guardian. And that was that restriction there. And again, not allowed to access education, healthcare, other government services without that male guardian's permission. It was pretty restrictive. And if you want to have an idea through pop culture, if you're Netflix and binging during this COVID-19 quarantine, this is a movie I highly recommend. Watched it. It was made in 2012 by a female filmmaker. And it actually won several awards about a young girl that wanted to ride a bicycle, which was forbidden at the time in 2012. This is something that's currently on Netflix now. It's a series of short films called 6 Windows in the Desert. Absolutely gives a nice sort of cultural view of Saudi Arabia. And then in 2005, the book Girls of Riyadh came out. And it's a light read, but it's heavy in some of the themes when you see some of the restrictive conditions that the women were living under. So let's take a look at the timeline for Saudi women's rights. So way back in 1955, they opened the first school for girls. Then they had to wait a whole 15 years later before the first university for women opened. And then we look at 35 years later before we saw any other movement. We had the end of forced marriages on paper. In 2006, women were able to obtain an ID card without their guardian's permission. First female government minister. And in 2009, that really is key, to have a voice in government who is helping to shape and create policy that's going to impact women. 2011, lingerie shops can be staffed by women and are required to be staffed by women. That was a very big deal when it came to women in the world of work, because prior to that, only men were staffing those. And I don't know about you ladies, but I don't like to buy my brasiers from men. So that was nice, and it opened up an opportunity for Saudi women to get out into the retail environment. In 2012, as Saudi Arabia started to seek more international recognition and they wanted to be part of the Olympic Games, they knew that they might be shunned from the Olympics if they didn't allow women in. So we had 2 female athletes that took place in the Olympics, and they had their male guardians, of course, travel with them. In 2013, actually right after WAJDA came out, they passed a rule that women could ride bicycles, not for transportation per se, but for recreation in certain environments. And then the first woman to practice law, she became a lawyer. Prior to that, they were only legal consultants. We had the right to vote and run for public office in 2015. And there we see a very pivotal thing. I was there in December of 2015, and it was absolutely thrilling to see how excited the women were that they were finally getting a voice to be able to vote in municipal elections. In 2016, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia joined the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and here the ball starts to roll, that Saudi Arabia is starting to want to get the international attention so that it can become a thriving community. From there, in 2017, women can finally access healthcare and education, government services with their male guardian, the first women to head the Saudi Arabia Stock Exchange, and then boom. Now, I have to disclose here that at the end of 2017 is when I left Saudi Arabia. So a lot of these wide sweeping changes that you're seeing is because it's, hang on just a second. Grace says that she can't see a picture. Can anybody pop in and tell me if they are able to see the picture? Can folks see the picture? Can people see the screen? Okay, good. All right. I didn't want to be talking to a blank wall. And I think there might be some smart ink going on. So I don't know if one of the co-hosts, if there's a smart ink function, you may want to disable that because it looks like there's some scribbles going on the screens here. All right, so in 2018, a lot of things happened that I was seeing from afar. My friends that were back in Saudi Arabia were telling me all about these. So women could open their own business. They can apply for the military service with guardian permission. They are allowed into sports events. They can exercise in public. And of course, the thing that the whole world got very excited about was the driving ban was finally lifted. So that meant that women could transport themselves to work, and that's really key. Then in 2019, women can finally travel on their own. They can get their own passports. Sandy, you got your Saudi driver's license in August of 2018. I'm really excited to hear more about that. So during the Q&A, we'll definitely be tapping into your experiences. And then so then we're also looking at that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia just this last year has announced that they're going to be offering a tourist visa. And so in aligning with what they feel they need to make sure that international women can come to the country and feel comfortable, now they're saying that non-Saudi women can go outside without the abaya, and they're ending segregation in restaurants. And in restaurants, there used to be a men's entrance and a family and women's entrance. So now I understand that that is going away, which is very exciting news. Now, for those of you Western women, folks in Peru and the United States and other parts of the quote-unquote Western world, I don't want you to feel shocked that you feel like these were big things to be made. Because if you think about it, Saudi Arabia, they got the right to vote in 2015. We women in the United States got the right to vote in 1920. But it took a full 50 years before we could open our own bank account, before we could open our own credit card. That didn't happen until 1974. And then even in the 60s and 70s, women were not allowed to compete in the marathon. And you can see this woman here in the Boston Marathon, she is getting attacked by the officials of the marathon. So really what it took 50 years for countries like the United States to do for women's rights, Saudi Arabia accomplished that in 5 years. And they still have a way to go, but it is progress. So you may be asking yourself, why now? What is the change? Well, around 2005, Bill Gates spoke at a technology conference in Saudi Arabia. And it was a room that was about 4/5 full of men, and they were seated on the left side, and then there was a partition in the middle, and only about 1/5 of the audience was comprised of women. And they actually were not very vocal during this presentation. At the end of the presentation, a Q&A session broke out, and one of the male members of the audience asked Bill Gates, he said, Saudi Arabia intends to be in the top 10 when it comes to nations who are leveraging technology. Do you think this is possible by the year 2010? Bill Gates, his response was, if you're not fully utilizing half the talent in the country, you're not going to get close to the top 10. So this is when I believe that Saudi Arabia really wanted to make sure that they were competitive on not only a local, but a global and regional level in their economy. So in 2015, King Abdullah, after he passed away, and he had started to make a lot of these reforms for women's rights. And then when King Solomon took over after King Abdullah's death in 2015, women were worried. Is the progress going to continue? And thankfully it has. The son of King Salman, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, you may know as MBS, he began an initiative in April of 2016 called Vision 2030. And the goal for Saudi Arabia is that by 2030, they would be making some wide sweeping changes so that they would no longer be an oil-based economy, but that they would be more diversified. So the 3 tenets of Vision 2030 are a vibrant society, a thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. And even in 2018, we saw that it was called the Year of the Saudi Women by many publications, because a lot of these women were making enormous strides. And what was happening is that with this Vision 2030, the goal was to increase women's employment from the 20% where it is now, or where it was at that time, to 40%. So let's see what the scorecard is for Saudi Arabia in that area. So here we're looking at the stats moving forward from 2013, and we saw a big jump from 2014 to 2015. Again, we saw another leap in the numbers in 2016, and we are seeing a steady increase in the number of women that are participating in the labor force, but they still have a long way to go to reach that 40% number in 2030. So with the Ministry of Labor and Social Development, they are making some additional changes where they're opening up different career pathways for Saudi women. Before, there were some careers that were restricted for women, and they're opening those up. So we're looking at, they wanted to increase the number of jobs in advertising and marketing for women, in accounting, in computer programming, and in as pharmacists and in pharmacy work. And additionally, what we are finding too is that with Saudiization, the efforts have ramped up over the past 3 to 4 years, in which the Ministry of Labor has deemed certain positions are only to be held for Saudi nationals. And this helps Saudi women because these jobs have quotas that they're required to fill with Saudis. And so we did, and for those of you who haven't worked in Saudi Arabia, a lot of their economy had been run by foreign workers. You have decades ago when oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia, they were bringing folks in from all over the world with their expertise, so that by the time 2010 came around, we had about only 7% of the labor force was Saudi in the private sector, and the Saudis only represented about 47% of their entire workforce. So you had over half of the labor force were foreign workers. They weren't even Saudi nationals. So Saudiization seeks to make those changes. Oh, hello? Okay, so I have another poll, another quiz for you folks. I'm gonna pop it up right now. So this quiz is which nation ranks, which nation ranks #1 for women's employment participation? So let's pull that up here, just a second. All right, what are your answers? So the nations we have are Iceland, Rwanda, Laos, or the United States. Ooh, we got a lot of variety here. Okay, a lot of folks are interesting, very interesting. Okay, I'll give it 5 more seconds to record your answers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and we'll end it. And here's the results that you guys thought. You had Iceland was the winner, and then behind that you had the United States, then Rwanda, and then Laos. Well, I will show you what the answer really is. And that is Rwanda. How many of you got Rwanda? Type in the chat bubble if you got that answer correct. Rwanda. Yay, Diana, Alina, Mildred, woohoo! Good for you. Yes, Rwanda has made some significant gains, not only in employment, but a large part of that success is because they have Rwanda tops the world with representation of women in government. And if you go on a Google search, you'll be able to see a lot of information about the strides that women are making in Rwanda. It's pretty exciting. Okay, for my Peru folks, so those are the top 10 nations. What do you think for Peru? What about Peru? Where do you think Peru ranks in the labor participation? Type in the chat box. What do you think? Where's Peru? What does it rank for women's labor participation? Okay, I got 30 from Ingrid. 50 from Michelle, Claudia, 45. Oh, I saw the answer. The answer is 20. And it's gone away, but I think Lizeth, yes, You were the one that got the answer correct. Everybody else underestimated Peru. You guys are really rocking it when it comes to women's representation in the labor market. So well done. All right, for my fellow Americans that are listening, where do you think the US falls? What do you think the US is? So the United States for labor participation, okay, Priscilla, you said 38. Got Jennifer saying 35, 15, 3. 18 from Sicily. Oh, you guys, you are so wrong. The United States ranked at 78, way below Peru. Shame. Yeah, it is. So, I think as Americans, sometimes they think they're the center of the world, but we really realize that this is not the case. I don't know why. Someone asked why that is, and that will be another webinar for another day to see why there is underrepresentation of women in the United States in the world of work. A lot of choices, obviously, but okay, so let's go to the bottom. So we have the top, Saudi Arabia holds the dubious honor of not being in the bottom 10, but just right above it at 170. So right now, and remember from our previous tables, we saw what the participation rate was in Saudi Arabia. So they're up. They went from 17 at a labor rate to about 23%. So they're improving, but there's still a long way to go. And then, of course, for my folks in Afghanistan, they're significantly higher. And there's a lot of reasons that you can say for this. With Afghanistan, because they're a war-torn economy, because actually there's not as many men in that labor force anymore because of the war, it has forced a lot of women out into the workforce when maybe whether or not that was their choice. But so it makes it really interesting to see what's going on around the world and why women work. So looking about women about all over the world and thinking about what resources they need to be successful, type in the chat bubble, what resources do you think are very important for women to be able to work? What resources do they need to be able to work and juggle all the things that this young woman on the screen? Okay, got education from Priscilla, childcare from Jean, transportation. Education, yes, definitely education. What other resources do? Oh, lactarios. That's for breastfeeding women, right? Am I getting my Spanish right on that? A place to live, yeah, housing. Okay, well, I agree with all of those things. And so as you noticed in the chat bubble, we talked about education, particularly higher education beyond just primary education. That's work training, vocational training, or going to university. Money, how can we make sure that women are getting paid equitably, that there are laws in place to make sure that their income is protected when they go to work, and that they have financial autonomy to open bank accounts and open businesses. Transportation, of course, that's a big thing. You need to actually get to work. And then here, the hard hat is to signify safety, talking about how do you create a workplace environment that has safety, where you feel safe both emotionally as well as physically. Also for maternity leave, making sure that your job is protected when you leave to have a baby and that it's waiting for you when you come back, and also being able hopefully to get that time off and get paid to have that time off. And then once you have that baby, having childcare. So being able to juggle work and being a mom, all of those things are very important to women, and several other things that you guys have there. Strong family support, absolutely. Academic resources. Juan, I like your family support. And Juan, as my man in the group, we're going to talk a lot about how having male support, family support, is huge for women's success. So that was a great answer there. So let's look at Saudi Arabia and what kind of educational resources they have put into place to try to bridge that gap, to make sure that women are succeeding. Well, they've done some wonderful things when it comes to their literacy movement, and this is a huge thing. For the Saudi women that I spoke with, my students as well as colleagues, they shared with me that their grandmothers couldn't read. and sometimes their mothers couldn't read. So we look back at those years where 1955 was the first girls' school ever to be open. 1970 was the first women's university. So literacy for women back in those days was not a priority. The Saudi government over the last 2-3 decades has changed that to where women's literacy is incredibly important, and we're seeing the results of that. So currently, according to the World Bank and other sources, 99% of Saudi women between the ages of 15 and 24 can read and write. Tertiary education, this is higher education, whether that's university or vocational college, looking at the graduation rates, and this is actually a stat that you're seeing in places all around the world, that women graduates outnumber male graduates. The catch-22 with this is that even though you have a larger representation of women with higher education, you have higher unemployment rates or higher non-participation in the workforce. So you have incredibly overqualified women in Saudi society who can't find a job or aren't supported in the way they need to find a job. So that's something we'll look at more deeply. This is a nice one. So I don't know if anybody knew this. You get free tuition at public universities in Saudi Arabia. Did anybody know that? That was one thing that I was delighted with. When I was at King Saud University, as well as other schools, they offered free tuition. Now, for the private universities, that's not the case. And also, in addition to that free tuition, these, both men and women, they get an educational stipend. So every month that you are a university student, you get money. So here's the breakdown. In Saudi riyals, the exchange rate is about one US dollar to 3.75 Saudi riyals. So I usually divide that number by about 3-ish, and that's where you get US dollars. So for scientific studies students, they get 1,000 riyals, 850 if you're humanities, and then for graduate level students, they get 900 riyals a month just for being a student. So it's a really great incentive to go to school, isn't it? I wish I had those kind of incentives here. So additional Saudi government resources that we see for women to try to support these employment goals. So for childcare, they're given up to 800 riyals per month per child. And then with an initiative by the Saudi government as part of their Vision 2030, they are trying to open, and they're in the process right now, they started in 2018, that 233 new child care centers were going to be open across the nation. So that's underway right now. Transportation, you get a subsidy of 800 riyals a month. If you're a working woman, you can apply for this. And then maternity leave. So not only is your job protected while you're on leave, but you also get 10 weeks of paid leave. Unfortunately, men, paternity leave is only 3 days long. So we still have a win to get there, but otherwise they have a pretty robust maternity leave policy. They also are putting legislation into place for workplace safety and working conditions. And then the last couple years, we've seen some real strides being made for sexual harassment. They take it very seriously. And you think about, it's a very new concept to have women working in a mixed gender environment with men. And there still are several businesses in Saudi Arabia that are segregated, where they have a women's only and men's only. And there are a number of reasons for that I can go into more in the Q&A session. But for those mixed gender workplaces, they do have specific guidelines. For example, if you have a woman working a shift, there has to be at least 2 women on that shift so that she's not alone, surrounded by men, which is good because that means they're going to be hiring more women. They have some pretty steep fines for violation, and they've made it easier to report sexual harassment. So one of the things, though, that I see when you don't, and this is a lack of perception. I think a lot of Saudi women aren't participating in the workplace because they feel like they don't have role models. And you think about that. When you have about 20% of women working, their mothers, their grandmothers, maybe these are women that didn't work, so they don't have immediate role models in their life to see what that means. So this is a great organization Half the Sky movement, this is about women's empowerment all over the world and seeing the importance of having role models who are living their dreams and doing things that you can aspire to. So one of the things that I try to incorporate in my lessons with my students were a few things. So when it comes to vocational readiness, I think the Saudi government is trying to do a lot of tangible resources, but going back to those resiliency lessons, there's a lot of internal things that need to take place. There's emotional shifts, both individually as well as a society. And so what I tried to do with my students is provide inspiration through role models. I was tying in the 2030 goals and looking at what kind of in-demand career pathways were available for women, looking at what kind of legacy they're going to be creating for their country. It's very patriotic, this whole 2030 movement, and there were signs all over the King Saud University campus. Soft skills training, and this includes everything from interpersonal communication to being a reliable employee, showing up on time, following instructions, creative problem solving. So we talked about that. And then language skills. And one of the things when you're, and I speak English, so I'm very privileged, I know that. But so not only is it important to be able to read and write effectively in your native language, but a lot of times job opportunities are opened up when you take on a second language. And that can include English or Spanish or French or Arabic or whatever that second language is. So we talked about language skills development. And then, of course, encouraging the use of technology. And definitely in the chat box, let's see how many of you are using technology more in the last couple months than you ever did before. Let's see, what's your technology use look like over the last couple months? Janina, yes, 200%. I definitely feel that. I get a lot of Zoom fatigue is what they call. So there's been a lot of increases. So looking at the women that can inspire as role models, and back in 2017, Arabian Business Magazine published this article, and it was actually quite controversial at the time. To be honest, when I went to class and featured these women in my presentation of students, I was kind of worried that I was going to be fired from my job at King Saud University because it was talking about issues of women's empowerment, women's driving, whatever. At that time was, you know, it was something that we weren't supposed to do. And even some of my students came up to me afterwards and said, "Teacher, my family does not approve of some of these women." And if you look at these women in that top row, the lady in the niqab, she's actually the first lawyer to practice in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have Haifa, she's the filmmaker there. Huda, she's the second from the left in the middle, and she's at Saudi Aramco as one of the top executives there. On the bottom in the parka, we have the youngest Arab ever to climb Mount Everest, happens to just be a Saudi woman. And then many of these other women have made incredible breakthroughs in chemistry, in engineering. You have Michelle at the top right, and she has her own aerospace engineering company. And many of them, even in the health sciences, they were talking about women's health issues that were taboo. And so really being able to recognize the achievements of these women and have them be role models. So in the United States, when I did workforce development there, and I had a person who was trying to break into a new career field, we had what we called informational interviews. And this is when I would encourage them to go on LinkedIn and find someone who is doing the job that they really wanted to have, or to tap into their personal connections, or to tap into me as a career consultant to help them get connected with these employers. And that was, they would schedule 30 minutes where they could sit down with that person and talk about how they got to be where they are and what were some of their tips for success. And it was a wonderful experience that led to many mentorships. But how I recreated that in the classroom is I put together profiles of these influential women who had broken through barriers in society. And of course, Huda Al Ghossan, she's with Saudi Aramco, and she's a King Saud University alumnus. So that was exciting for the women to see that she studied English literature as an undergrad at King Saud University. And then we have Latifa, who she created her own coffee making machine so that she could make Arabic coffee. And now she's the CEO and owner of her own company. So it gave these women a chance to really embody themselves as this VIP. So I'd have one student be the interviewer and the other student be the interviewee. And so they really, their brains were thinking about what it took to get to those places in life. So it was really important to have them immerse themselves in these personalities of these powerful women. All right, got another pop-up quiz for you guys. So what do y'all think? What is the average age of someone in Saudi Arabia? So I'm going to launch the poll now. Here we go. Okay, so 36, 29, 27, or 41. Ooh, we got all kinds of answers going on here. All right, I'll give you 5 more seconds to get your answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's show you the results here. Oh, my mouse disappeared. Here we go. Okay. So it looks like most of you chose 29, with 36 closely following, 27, and then 41. And the answer is 27. So 27 is quite young. And if you look at the average age of, say, the United States, of somebody in the United States, the average age is 38.1, I think. So that's really key to know, that the country is, well, Alejandra, you're asking why. People are making lots of babies in Saudi Arabia, but the birth rate, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But we do have a very young nation. So when you guys think about having a population that is very young, what does that bring to mind? As far as, what do you think are going to be effective ways of reaching this young generation? Any ideas? So if you're wanting to empower young people, get them actively engaged, actively involved, how do you do that? Got a generation of young people in Saudi Arabia. Chat with me. Nobody's popping up any answers. Very young women. Yes, Sheila. Technology. Alina, you nailed it. So in Saudi Arabia, the statistics there are that with YouTube, even though, say, the United States, just from sheer population size, we're the largest consumer of YouTube. However, Saudi Arabia per capita has more YouTube usage than any other country in the world. And so with the initiatives of Vision 2030, leveraging social media, leveraging technology is a really big deal. And how we see that happening is in a number of different ways. One of the things that we're finding is with entrepreneurship, Vision 2030 also has some built-in initiatives when it comes to entrepreneurship. So they have economic incubators and different subsidies that are available for startup businesses. But for women in particular, especially before they were able to drive, and some of them don't have their driver's license, one of the things is being able to use social media to start businesses. So have catering companies, maybe cosmetology or henna painting. They can be accountants from home. They can be dressmakers and seamstress. They can do handicrafts. They can put together instructional materials. And then She Works, this organization is actually, it helps women from all walks of life and with all kinds of goals, whether they're trying to establish a business from home or they're trying to enter the workplace outside of the home. So that's a really great business to follow. And even, I love the creativity of this one social influencer, Miva Flowers. She's able to do makeup tutorials with her niqab on the entire time. And actually, she's delightful. I wish I spoke Arabic because she's a real fun video YouTuber to watch. So, and this, I wanted to go back. Are they the startup generators? Yes. So Sheila, you asked a question about incubators. Yes. So with economic incubators, Vision 2030 is creating several of them at key regions throughout Saudi Arabia so that business startups can come in and use those resources to try to launch their business? That's a great question, Sheila. So I wanted to go back. One, he talked about how important it is for family support in order for there to be a grassroots movement for women to feel like they can enter the world of work. And I thought this chart was very illuminating. What can you guys tell me about this chart here? What are you seeing as far as the demographics of Saudi Arabia? What do you notice on this chart? I'm not seeing any answers in the chat box. Feel free to type something. What do you notice from this chart about the demographics of Saudi Arabia? Are there more women or are there more men? Anyone? More men, yes, and they do have a high birth rate too. Yes, more men. Excellent. Okay, now the chat box is exploding. You are absolutely right. There are many more males to females, and I won't launch into the reasons why for that. It is what it is. And so with that being said, advocacy becomes a huge thing, because in order for women, even though there's laws on the books, on paper, saying that they can work and there's all these resources available, ultimately we need to get men on our side so that we feel empowered and supported to leave the house. So we do have more men to women there, but there is some positive news going back to that birth rate. So in 2020, the birth rate now is 2.34. Now that still is, it shows growth, right? But if you look just even 30 years ago, the birth rate in Saudi Arabia back then was 6.66. And so when you take that and you look at the birth rate back then was 3 times what it is now, what do you think that says about the family structure and how that's changing? Any idea in the chat box? Do you want to talk about that? What do you think has changed as far as attitudes? People are having fewer babies, right? And that means, yes. So for a number of reasons that, women are freed up, that they don't have so many children at home, that they do have fewer children, so that then this opens them up to pursue career pathways. So that's really encouraging news, actually. So talking about advocacy and what that looks like. Again, women ourselves can only go so far, but if we don't get the support of those in power, and in a country like Saudi Arabia and several other countries around the world, there is a patriarchy in place that we need to find out who our allies are, who has the power and the strength to make changes, and make sure that they speak on our behalf. So one of the things that I find very encouraging is when you have powerful men that encourage young women. And this young 14-year-old here in this picture, she has royalty presenting her with an award for creating this ecological scooter that was very friendly to the environment. And I see we're running low on time, so I'm just going to go quickly through here about advocacy. So in Iran, the men are wearing hijabs to tell the society that women should have the choice whether or not they want to wear the hijab, and they have that freedom. And even, this is one of my favorites. Oh, gotta go back and play him. Hang on. And this, if you think about what happened in Saudi Arabia with the driving laws changing, this was because husbands and fathers and uncles and brothers and grandfathers were teaching women to drive, and they were advocating on their behalf. And this is also where humor comes in. So, all right, just going quickly about advocacy, and I wanted to go through this quickly as far as when I then transitioned to Afghanistan, which had fewer resources, war-torn country. I worked primarily with men, and I was approached by the NATO command to have an integrated group of men and women. But I knew in order for this to be successful that I had to get buy-in from the men so that I could have the very first half and half gender integrated classroom in that country. So I was their mom. these were like my Afghan sons, and many of them are my son's age. He's going to be 27, so these were like my kids. And then when the women came on board, I made sure that the men were allowing the women to speak up. They were encouraging them to speak up in class. And then I was also encouraging the women to find their voice, because up to that point they had only been in women's classrooms and they felt very shy and not very comfortable speaking in front of the men. So it was a dual thing. And of course, every once in a while you have to just do a push-up contest with the men to show them that women are strong and can do just as much as they can. So one of the last final things I wanted to leave you with is that, you don't have to break through doors. Finding your key to helping empower women can be as simple as making connections. And this is my friend Suzanne Jalbert with the USAID Promote Women in Government. So when I was in Afghanistan, I was trying to have conversations with women and organizations that were already doing amazing work. And with USAID Promote Women in Government, they were getting women into positions of power so that they could shape policy, and they were doing job training with them. So one of the skills gaps that Suzanne identified is that the communication skills were lacking, and some of the soft skills were lacking in some of her folks. So I was more than happy to put together some writing workshops and some communication skills workshops to help. I wasn't doing anything big. I was just connecting and finding people who are already doing some really cool stuff in the world. Social entrepreneurship is also a big thing. Now, one of the things, as I'm rushing through these last few slides, I do want to remind everyone that all of these slides will be made available, that this presentation is getting recorded, so that recording will be available to anybody who registered, and I will also forward all these slides. So all these links you'll be able to find. And Susie, I could go on forever about the wonderful, complex dynamic in Afghanistan, but this 15-minute podcast that she gave about how to survive and thrive for women's economic empowerment in Afghanistan is wonderful. So please, take time and give her a listen. And then also the power of social entrepreneurship and supporting nonprofit organizations that are doing great work. You don't have to form your own nonprofit. Find people who are already doing it and support. So my friend, one of the women I worked with in Afghanistan, my roommate had started this organization with Syrian refugees where it's a knitting collective, and these women are able to sell their wares to larger markets. Jackie Faye Burton is a record setter. She is the first woman in history to complete 6 Ironmans on 6 continents in 1 year's time. And on the tails of that success, she started this nonprofit, She Can Try, and she sponsored the very first group of Afghan women to compete in an Ironman competition. There's Zainab, she's giving her a hug. She completed the Ironman in Dubai just this year. It was pretty incredible. So my final words to all of you are, whenever possible, buy local, buy social. The big corporations, they don't need any more of our money. But, if you're really going out of your way to support women and to support startup businesses that you truly believe in, that is the key. So those are the things to recap the workshop. Talking about the keys to resiliency and restrictive conditions, a sense of humor, a sense of appreciation is key. We talked about workforce growth for women, societal gains that they've had, what kind of resources are necessary for women's employment, supporting vocational readiness skills and entrepreneurship, and ultimately creating a sense of purpose and belonging and respect for family support, as well as for the men in our lives, to make sure that they are on board and invested in our progress. So my final riddle for you all today is, I never was, but always will be. No one has seen me, but everyone knows I exist. What am I? All right, show your answers in the chat box. Let's see what you have. Any idea? I hope everybody didn't leave. All right, the answer is tomorrow. That in spite of restrictive conditions, concrete, there is still growth that can happen when we have everything weighing on us. Woman, yes. Women are so important. I love that, Anna. All right, so please, if you enjoyed this and you want to further engage with me, I would love to have a conversation with you all about anything that we covered today or any other questions that you have. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my email there. And Ezekiel, if you want to unmute and we can take questions, if anybody has some questions. I'm going to try to put my camera back on so you can see me.
That will be great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
All right.
For such a great presentation. Yes, I think everybody has a lot of questions. We want to invite you, sorry, my light's not really well. We want to invite you, everyone. They can either raise their hands, pueden levantar la mano o escribir las preguntas en el cuadro del chat. También queremos invitarlos, por favor, a que terminado de responder las preguntas, no se desconecten, sino más bien a que enciendan sus cámaras porque nos gustaría poder tomar una captura de pantalla con todos ustedes. Así que si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, por favor, puede hacerla a partir de este momento.
All right, so any questions? Well, and I'm typing out a quick note here. I'm really grateful for everybody. All right, Maritza. I know this Maritza. Hi, Maritza, what's your question?
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I was not expecting such a thing, but I really appreciate that. And thank you for your bravery and going to Saudi Arabia and sharing these experiences with us. I think it's very valuable. I teach at the university here in Ecuador, and I'm also this type of women trying to change this narrative that relates about men. And as you may notice, I'm relatively young, and as I think, like in Peru, we live in a patriarchal, macho society. And I believe I was talking to another colleague. I don't know how the women in Saudi Arabia can have this resilience and strength. I complain a lot about Ecuador. I had the fortune to live and study in the United States. And coming back to live and teach in Ecuador, I have had a lot of cultural shocks about that. And with all this preamble, my question is, how would be your advice for women like me that in these kind of difficult waters, we are trying to navigate these work situations among a male society to strive for gender equality?
I would say, and that's a really good question because it's complex, right? That, you know, and this goes back to that key metaphor that, you know, sometimes we push. We're trying so hard to make big changes, and the more you push, the harder it gets, right? And so I'm a big believer in finding your allies, finding people who share the same values that are in positions of power. And in a patriarchal society like Peru and some of these other places, that would be men. So I think one person at a time, one woman at a time, talking with her husband, talking with her brother, raising her sons, doing all these things. If you find one person at a time that you can try to have them share your ideals, then work through those avenues to try to move forward your agenda. And I think even at the university level, having fellow faculty members. So if there are, you know, and I think it's important too. So there's two things. As a woman, I think building a sense of community within your university, reaching out to other female faculty members so that you are discussing the issues and your challenges so that you're not alone. But then also finding male faculty members that are your allies, that can speak on your behalf when it comes to making some of those changes. Does that answer your question, Maritza?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for the kind words, Diego. I'm so glad you joined us. All right, I have a question here from Ana Celeste. How can a government support public policies when it comes to gender violence? That's really important. And of course, it's heartbreaking during these times now of COVID-19 because women aren't in the public eye anymore. They're behind closed doors with abusers in many instances. And so, of course, during COVID-19, I think it's important for governments to be responsive to, and to find hotlines, to find ways that women can try to use technology or use ways to get the help they need when they're trapped indoors with these abusers. But then after this quarantine is lifted, it's really making sure that there is awareness. So with women's organizations, again, finding allies that are men, finding allies that do believe that women have the right to live in a safe environment and not be abused, and to have things. So that's on the one thing too. And I do want to talk about that, you know, women entering the workforce, it's a dual-edged sword. And so we have to be very careful when women start to enter the workforce. Men, especially machismo kind of men, they may feel threatened. Their masculinity may feel threatened. And so I think as a society, when we get men on board and recognize that it's not an affront to their masculinity to have their wives working, that then when men feel appreciated and like they have power, they then are more willing to share that power with their wives and daughters and sisters too. So I think as a government, it's creating an awareness campaign of making sure that men are held accountable when it comes to domestic abuse, that they feel empowered, and that we have men and women talking to each other and understanding each other's points of views. All right, I got another question from Celine. Rwanda, labor force participation. That's a great question. And it all comes back to Rwanda. What their key has been is they've had larger participation of women in government. And this is where their government actively, and I'm not an expert on Rwanda, but I do know that their government had actively put into place policies in which they had quotas that they had to fill at top positions in government, so that women were making policies. They were shaping a lot of these changes that were taking place. So when you have more women in positions of power in the government that are shaping these policies, there's a trickle down in how that then affects the society's opinion of women and issues of women's empowerment too. Thank you so much for your question, Selena. Any other questions?
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Tenemos. Bien. I think there is not any other question.
I know, and I'm sorry we ran a bit late. I apologize. Okay, Lisette, for example, in her work, the majority of work are men, and they believe if you talk to them in a nice mood, you're not strict. But if you shout, it's a delicate balance. I grew up, you saw my picture as a farm girl. I grew up with all brothers. I have a son. I have no daughters. I have no sisters. So I understand in many ways that you have to be very respectful of men. And this is something I truly believe, you know, and this is where there might be some contention even when it comes to other women's groups, that they vilify men in a way that makes men feel emasculated. And I think that we have to be very delicate when we are dealing with those kinds of issues to make sure that men feel appreciated. Because you look in Saudi Arabia, look at that video that gentleman made about no woman, no drive, those men in power that were awarding that girl with that special award. When you recognize men for the accomplishments that they are making, then, you know, it's just like when you ask your husband nicely to take out the trash, and he does so, and then when he comes back in, you say, honey, thank you so much for taking out that trash. This is exactly the type of thing we need to do. It needs to be balanced, and we have to show appreciation for the efforts that men are making and larger societies making. It's tough, it's delicate, I know.
Okay, Michelle, Erica Basurto asked me a question in Spanish, so I'm going to translate it to you.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
She asked, what kind of skills a woman should have in these current times to succeed?
Well, I think and we talked about this in our presentation about the use of technology, and really having the ability, well, I'd say it's a two-edged thing. So entrepreneurship skills and technology, I think we're seeing those two be very valuable in challenging times like this. And this is where even the Saudi women were very successful in Instagram businesses. And I know that when I was at Centrum a couple months ago, one of the presenters was talking about the power of Instagram for female entrepreneurs in some of the rural parts of Peru. So I would say, first of all, making sure that whatever technology you have available to you, whether it's on your smartphone, through apps, or other things, being able to be connected with a market that you can sell to. And then that creativity piece is putting on your entrepreneurship hat and thinking about what skills do I have now that can make money. Can I make handicrafts? Can I cook? Can I do catering? Can I do cosmetology? Any of those things. So as an entrepreneur, I think that's kind of the first level of the skill set that you need to be looking at. And then beyond that, the skills, once you're connected with technology, taking advantage of some of the resources online, you could learn how to become a computer programmer using just online learning right now. You can learn how to code. You can learn how to maybe do instructional design. There's a lot of things that just using technology now will help you when things open back up. And then also if you continue to work from home, I think really leveraging technology and feeling comfortable in this digital age that we live in is probably the key.
Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. Ahora queremos invitarlos a encender sus cámaras. Vamos a sacar una foto de todos los participantes. Michelle, I'm going to stop sharing your screen right now.
Okay.
We can take the picture. Ahí está. Por favor, todos si pueden encender sus cámaras.
All right, well, wonderful. If there's, so Ezekiel, I know that you said that Centrum is going to be sharing a link for the recorded Zoom video. Are we also, do you know, Ezekiel, we will be able to share the chat as well? Be able to save that?
Unfortunately, no, because the recording only records the presentation.
No problem. So I was going to actually tell the participants, and I just did it for myself now. So if you guys want to save the chat, if you go down to the chat box, there's 3 little dots, and you can click on that and click on Save Chat, and it will save the chat to your computer as a text file. So if there's any things there that you wanted to make sure that you would go back and revisit, you can save that chat box. And then otherwise, it sounds like there'll be a link provided for the video, and all of these slides with all the information and the web links will also be made available to you.
We just saved the chat, so we're gonna be sharing it alongside with the video and the presentation.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you very much to you, Michelle, for participating in this. And we also want to thank everyone who was part of this webinar. Queremos darle las gracias a todos y cada uno de ustedes que fueron parte de este webinar. Les invitamos a mantenerse conectados a todas las redes sociales del Centrum. Estamos haciendo este ciclo de webinars internacionales todos los martes y jueves, así que hay más temas por tratar, hay más expositores y los invitamos a que continúen participando. Muchas gracias a todos. And Michelle, once again, thank you so much for it. It was a great topic, and we are sure that you have enriched our community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye, Michelle.
Bye, Fernanda.